Afternoon, everybody. How you doing? Welcome back to the Spurs Talk Show. I am Sean Butler. Bugsy Malone is up in front, around the corner, doing the things she loves, chasing squirrels. I hope you're chasing your own version of squirrels. Please do me a favour, guys. Like the video for me if you don't mind. If you enjoy the content, hit the subscribe button for me if you haven't already. We're not far away from 18k. It's all very exciting. Hit the notification bell and drop a comment. Let me know your thoughts on today's topic. It's Friday afternoon. We're 48 hours away from the big one. I'll be honest, I'm riddled with nerves. I can't sleep. I'm going to the game. The ticket is going to be legit. And it's a new experience for me. And I guess I'm going to remember it regardless of what happens. But if we win, it's going to be one of those memories that stay forever. So I can't wait for it. But a little bit of news that has come along yesterday that I hope isn't going to have too much of a disruption on any of those preparations. I wouldn't have think it would have done. I wouldn't have thought it would have done, sorry. But we've got to talk about it. In yesterday's video, I talked about Scott Munn's first day in the job. What sort of impact was he going to have? What was his intentions? Hiring a new director of football. We're talking about Paratici, whether he's going to be around, probably not. I personally said, you know, if it's not broke, don't fix it. We're starting to see the wood for the trees. We're starting to see the fruit that is being born out of a long-held plan that took a lot longer than most people thought to start to shape everything the way that Paratici's vision had been based on, and it was going in the right direction. It is going in the right direction. And so I was worried about whether or not people who are going to come into a new job, whether it's Scott Munn or whether it's a director of football, they're naturally going to want to do their own thing, to shape it their own way, to carve out their own path, to implement their own ideas. It's human nature, I completely get it. But with that comes a lot of risk, because they're going to want to stamp their authority over their new role rather than doing, you know, implementing somebody else's vision, the predecessor's vision. But sometimes I worry about too much of that, from pillar to post, from feast to famine, that kind of knee-jerk change in direction is going to unnecessarily disrupt best laid plans. We didn't know how it was going to look, but within about 5 minutes of me uploading the video, we found out. According to Gary Jacob from the Times, he sacks Gabbanini, chief scout. Other reporters have said it wasn't a sacking, it was he's just decided to leave the club. But the whole thing to me seems incredibly proactive, but that's not necessarily a good thing. Look, I don't know, I don't think any of us really know some people might do, but I don't know how involved Gabbanini was in any of the particular transfers over the year that he's been at Tottenham. Was he involved early doors with the likes of Udogie? Maybe, because he had history at that club. And look how wonderful Udogie's introduction's been. What about Papa Sarr? Maybe, maybe not. What about the things more recently? Pedro Porro, or in this summer, Vicario, Maddison, Manor Solomon, Van der Ven, their first teamers. What about Ash Phillips and Alejo Veliz, Vuskovic? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I think that Gabbanini's involvement has been absolutely proven. Other people will tell you that they know, and they may do, but I don't know how much involvement he has. But for sure, everything we've done has been on a youth-centric model. He seems to have worked very well with Paratici, and according to the reports, both of them are going to have their kind of roles and their time at Tottenham finished right now, on day one of Scott Munn's new job. And it begs the question that if Scott Munn had started his role at Tottenham on July the 1st like he was supposed to, before any of that gardening leave issues arose, then would some of the players that we've signed this summer not have signed because Gabbanini and Paratici would already have been out the door? And again, I don't know, like you could look at all of the players we've signed and there's some story or another around how long we've been chasing them. People like Ash Phillips apparently has been on Tottenham's radar for a long time, for 2 or 3 years before Gabbanini was at the club, so maybe that's not as relevant. Maddison apparently has been Levy's favourite for 5 or 6 years, so maybe that's not relevant. Manor Solomon maybe is more just a business thing where you look at a player and you think, well, he's very good and he's free, you sign him, he can improve and add depth now and also have some asset appreciation, asset sell-on value, all that stuff in the future. And so maybe that wasn't a scouted player because people knew about him anyway from being in the Premier League. You know, I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I think Gabbanini's been instrumental in this and that. I would say that it's probably likely that he's, or more likely than not, that the Udogie transfer was on some level down to him. I'd also say that the Vicario transfer was on some level down to either him or Paratici or a combination of both. And listen, Vicario was a player that most Tottenham fans, when we first found out about it, were probably, the majority were probably scratching their head thinking it was just a cheaper version, a B-Tech version of Raya, and we just went, you know, Levy being Levy or whatever. And it's turned out that Vicario has been a brilliant signing so far. You know, wonderful with his distribution, getting better by the game, some brilliant saves that have kept us in games against Sheffield United and Manchester United, brilliant saves against in the game against Burnley and Bournemouth, and you can make the argument for Brentford as well. I don't think there's a single goal that he's conceded which you could really say is down to him making a mistake. Compare that to the likes of Onana, etc. So if those players are at some point or another at Tottenham because of the influence of those two men, and those two men wouldn't be here had Scott Munn had the same intentions to do what he did on day one, but that day one was supposed to be in July, then again it makes you lean into the question of, like, where would we be had Scott Munn not been pictured on a plane with Daniel Levy, if that was the reason why his gardening leave was extended. Listen, I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and tell you. What I will say is anybody that's angry about the situation, I get it. I know Johnny H from Twitter, like, I love the guy. I know he's angry about it, and I get it. And I've seen other people as well that are angry that he's come in like a bull in the china shop and has disrupted things that for the first time are looking good. The plan was looking to be developing, and the benefits were starting to be shown. And for him to come in and have to stamp his authority, like everyone does in a new job that has authority and power to yield, they usually do yield it early to make sure everyone knows who's the boss. I get it, but I also think it was unnecessary, and I understand why people were leaning that direction. I am too, emotionally. Logically, though, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to tell you that I think that for all of these things, I don't know the true involvement in any of those deals with those particular people. I don't know exactly what's happened. I don't think any of us do, whether he was sacked, whether it was always on the cards, whether Ange Postecoglou, who clearly does have a relationship with Scott Munn from his previous life in Australia, whether or not those two have got together and have said, no, we've got someone better in mind, and who that person is, maybe that's going to be announced in the coming days. According to the reports in the Daily Mail, the director of football has already been figured out, and it's going to be hired in situ in the next week or two. So maybe it's all part of a grand plan that was always going to happen, and Paratici was only a consultant basis because of the future thing that's now being rolled out, just a little bit delayed. And Gabbanini, maybe he was sacked, maybe he wanted the director of football job, maybe he wanted us, to move up to something that he wasn't quite ready for. Again, if you don't know the details, then it's difficult to really land on a strong opinion on it, and so I'm not going to. And also what I would say is, with any of these things, like I've said 1,000 times about Paratici, anybody that was calling him the Don or the Con were probably going too early, because directors of football, the impact of the efforts, they have latency. It's a lagging indicator. You're putting something into play now that's going to yield its fruits 2-3 years down the line, and I think even now it's still too early to say whether or not Paratici's work was a success. I think whoever the next guy that comes in, and Scott Munn, I think you're going to have to wait 2-3 years to figure it out, unless something drastic happens in the short term where it all implodes on itself. Then maybe then you can say, well, this has just been a disaster from the get-go. But in reality, you should probably allow these things to filter through, and for the dust to settle before we make any strong convictions. But at the same time, like I say, emotionally, I do think everything was moving in the right direction, and if it's not broke, why are you trying to fix it? Other than to come in and set your agenda in motion and let everybody know that you're not going to fulfill somebody else's vision, you're going to create your own. I just really hope that the vision that Scott Munn has, and whoever his director of football is, I hope that it's all consensus along with Ange. I trust Ange Postecoglou at the moment, and I hope that the vision is not too dissimilar to the one that we've seen. I like the youth-centric approach. Maybe there's somebody out there that doesn't have the baggage of Paratici. Maybe he'll have his ideas of the best scouts, but that the approach that we're taking, which has come from Daniel Levy, which is youth-centric, but still trying to acquire the best talent, and then also sort of filter in occasionally where we need to some more established, more ready now players to help out in the depth element. I've spoken about this with regards centre backs. I think this January we don't need to go and sign another 22-year-old centre back. We've got two what look like brilliant centre backs coming through the youth team, and we've got two very young or relatively young starters. So to go and get a third one to sit back up to Romero and Van der Ven, who's also 22, is going to act on like a bottleneck on Vescovic and Dorrington. So I think that it's more appropriate in that situation to go a little bit more senior, who can come in and fill the gap and play and not have any drop off in quality, but also knows that it's a kind of 2-year, kind of 3-year contract where his responsibility is also to kind of nurture some of the youth that are coming through. And there's plenty of players out there that can offer that value. So I just hope that, and that was just an example, but I just hope that the vision here is not a 90-degree pivot, because when you have those, when you play military golf where you're hitting from one set of rough to the other all the time, you're overcorrecting. The pendulum swings too far from one way to the other. I've seen it so often in businesses that I've worked with. I've seen it. You see it in the government. You see it all the time. If you knee-jerk and you change direction too violently, then you're always left with square pegs in round holes in where the rubber meets the road. And that to me is my worry. I don't mind. I'm okay if Scott Munn is the guy and Daniel Levy's identified him and he's got his plan. I'll let it plan out. I'll let it pan out. My gut reaction tells me I'm unhappy about it, and that's why I'm considerate of people that are annoyed. But I also listen and see the people, the fans that are saying, come on, it's not that big of a deal. It's not going to disrupt, the first team too much, so let's wait and see. Speaking about the first team, just on my last little comment here, North London derby on Sunday. I want to get your thoughts. If you are still watching this, then let me know in the comments below. I want to get your thoughts as well on, obviously Scott Munn, the whole thing there, but with regards the experience of our first 11 in North London derbies. Do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing that the majority of our team have not participated in a North London derby before? We know that Sonny has participated in a lot. Kulusevski's participated in a few. Romero has in a couple. Bissouma has only participated in 2 as late substitutions under Conte. Pape Sarr started the home leg, the 2-0 home game defeat last year to Arsenal, but was subbed off. Everybody else has never played a North London derby. Vicario hasn't, Van der Ven hasn't, Udogie hasn't, Porro hasn't, Emerson I don't think has, Manuel Solomon hasn't, Maddison hasn't. I don't even think Richarlison has either. So just worried a little bit about whether or not, I'm sure they've all played in their own versions of massive monster derbies, but the North London derby, let's be honest, is the biggest and the best of all of the arch rival derbies going. And I wonder whether it's a good thing or a bad thing that these players are going in having been told about the derby but haven't experienced it yet. Whether that kind of ignorance or naivety can be yielded into a positive where they remain level-headed and calm and measured. Remember how frequently the yellow card is shown. In the home derby, the home game last year, I think there was like 6 yellow cards to the Tottenham side and 4 to the Arsenal starting 11, plus a couple others from the subs as well. Crazy. There was a red card in the away version. Emerson got sent off, changed the game. Shouldn't have been a red card in my opinion. So I just wonder whether or not the relative inexperience of the Tottenham team. I haven't actually looked at the Arsenal team, so I don't know whether or not they have the same amount of relative inexperience. Let me know if you know. But I just wonder whether or not it could be a negative or a positive that more than half of our first team, or the likely starters, haven't experienced it. And when it's such a big game, it's another variable to think about. I'm going to leave it there, guys. Like, subscribe and comment. And as always, bye-bye.